Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Today I have something quite cool. I want to show you how we can use attribute-based access control for our Azure Container Registry. So the plan for today is, first I'm going to give you a quick introduction what the attribute-based authentication is with the Azure Container Registry, and then we spend most of our time with a demo. As always, if you're interested in the slides or the code examples, you can scan the QR code or you'll find the link in the description down below. So first, let's talk about the Azure Container Registry and how the kind of old way worked, how we can authenticate. There we have Azure RBAC, the role-based access control, and with this we can give different permissions. So for example, we can have the owner permission that can do everything, or we can have the ACR pull permission that can only pull images, and we can also have the ACR push permission that can push images. This works fine. The only problem or downside of this approach is that the permissions are for the entire container registry. This means if you share your container registry with a different project or a different team, then everyone has the permissions of their role. So for example, if I have the ACR pull role, then I can download all the images inside the container registry and not only the ones I own. It's not a problem if you have just one registry per team and you want to download all of them anyways. But for example, if you share them with multiple teams because it's easier to manage, it's cheaper, then you would have problems with this. This is why we have the attribute-based access control, ABAC, and it's a combination of RBAC and ABAC. So I'm going to show you later in the demo, but we assign an RBAC role and then we set a condition. For example, I can set a rule to get access to the repositories, and with the attribute-based access control, I can set a permission to only get access to repositories that start, for example, with team A. After I configure this, I only have access to all the repositories that start with team A. The advantage of this approach is I can share my container registry, especially if I want to use the premium tier, which is more expensive but offers better security features like private endpoints. Then it can make sense to share the container registry with multiple teams. Also, if you have a platform team, so a central team that's managing all your resources, it's easier to manage just one or a couple of container registries rather than managing 50, 100 or even more. So here on the screenshot, we can see how this works. In this case, I gave permissions to my user to access all the repositories that start with ml/inferencing. And as you can see, they have access to all these repositories, but they don't have access to repositories that start with something different, like ML training. I don't have access. And this is exactly what I'm going to show you today. So in the demo, first we're going to create a new container registry. Then we configure the permissions that my demo user has access to all my repositories that start with team A. And then we also will see that this demo user doesn't have access to repositories that start with team B. With this said, now let's switch over to the terminal and let's get started with the demo. Here in the terminal, let's define a couple of variables first. So this is the name of our Azure Container Registry, the location and the name of the resource group. What's important, that the name of the container registry has to be unique worldwide. So you should use a different name than I'm using here. With these variables, now let's create a new resource group. And then we are going to deploy our container registry inside this resource group. So what we do here is we use the ACR create command. Then we provide the name and the resource group. For the tier, we're going to use basic today because it's the cheapest. As I said, in a production workload, it might make sense to have the premium tier because you have geo-replication and also private endpoints. Then for the role assignment, that's the most important parameter. We set the mode to RBAC, ABAC. This means role-based access control and attribute-based access control. And in the end, we query the ID because we're going to need the ID of the container registry to do the role assignments. Then we also get a warning here in the Azure CLI. This is just about your tasks. So if you have an existing container registry and you update it, that might break some of the functionality of the tasks. But for the demo today, we can ignore this. So creating the container registry should only take a couple seconds, and we can check this by just printing the ID. There you can see we have our ID now. This proves that the container registry has been created. Next, I'm going to create or import 3 images and create 3 repositories so we have something to test with. To do this, I use the ACR import command. There I just provide the source, that's the hello world image, and then the repository I want to use, or to be more precise, the image I want to use, and this will create the repository. So in this case, my repository is named team-A. The image inside this repository is called hello world, and the tag is latest. With this no wait flag, we don't have to wait, so it's being imported in behind the scenes right now, and we can continue with importing the next one. Here you can see it's basically the same, except that I changed the name in my container registry from hello world to bye bye world. This just allows us to have a second image for the testing. Then we repeat this a third time, but this time we use the team B repository. So it's the same image again, but a different name of the repository, and this will again allow us to test that we don't have access to this team B repository. So this will take 1 or 2 minutes, and while the images are being imported, we can assign our first attribute-based access control to a demo user. To do this, we use the Azure role assignment, but we also have to create a condition. So let me paste the condition here. And the first time you do this, it might be easier in the Azure portal, because there you can just click around and then you can create this string, what you can see here. And after this, you can just copy paste it and use it. You could also use it in a JSON file. Then you don't have to do this replacing. This is just something from the copy paste that PowerShell adds some special characters which the command doesn't like. But for now, let's take a look at what this command does. So let's start on the top. So here you can see what permissions we want to have. So it's the repository content read and the metadata read. And also we have down here a certain condition. So for example, here you can say the container registry, for the registry, the repositories, and inside the repository, the name. So it's a bit complicated, I think, the first time you see it, but I will show you in the Azure portal again later, which makes it hopefully easier to understand. But right now, we just have the name of the repository, then a condition. In this case, the string starts with ignore case. This basically means our repository name starts with a string that we are going to provide, and we ignore the case. So it doesn't matter if it's uppercase, lowercase, a mix. Everything will work. And the string for this is team-A, and then the slash. I like to have the slash at the end because with this I can really make sure that I have the team A and not a team, for example, team alpha. This would also work because the string starts with team A. But with the slash, I can guarantee that it's only team A. Then we save this in this condition variable. Let's clean this up. And now we can do the AC role assignment create. So what we do here is we have this assignee, that's my demo user. Then we assign a role. And here it's important that you can't use the old RBAC roles. They don't have conditions and they would just be applied for the entire registry. So these are new rules. I think all of them start with Container Registry, and there you can just find out what you are looking for. In this case, we're using the Container Registry Repository Writer. This means we can write and read images in my repositories. Then we provide the condition. So in this case, we say I want to have the Container Registry Repository Writer rule if the repository name starts with team A. Then we set the scope. That's the ID of our container registry. And the last two parameters are optional. So a description, just to understand what's going on. And the condition version, the default version is 2.0 anyways, but I just want you to see it. So in the future, if there's an update, you don't have to change anything. If there are any breaking changes, you still use the version 2.0. But if you want, you could also update to the newest version. Then we apply this. It will take a couple seconds. And then we have our rule assignment. Right now, that's what I'm going to show you in the portal later. We have permissions to read and write for our repositories, but we don't have the permission to display the image or the repositories in the container registry. This means if I were to open the container registry right now, I wouldn't see anything, and I would have to know what repositories are there for me. That's a bit annoying, and the way around this is to assign another rule, again to my demo user. This time we assign the rule Container Registry Repository Catalog Listener, and then we provide the scope. So again for our container registry, and you can see we don't have a condition. So this rule will be assigned for everything in the container registry. Again, so only takes a couple seconds, and that's everything we have to do to set it up. Now we can already test the access. Since I just used my admin user, we have to switch the user to the demo user. To do this, we just do AC login. This opens the browser. I select the demo user, and now I'm logged in. Then we select the subscription. This user only has access to one subscription anyway, so nothing to select here. And just to prove that the demo user is logged in, we can do an AC account show, and we query the username. So here we can see it's the demo user. Now let's take a look at all of the tags of one of our repositories. To do this, we do an AC ACR repository show tags. We provide the name of our container registry and the name of the repository. What's important, we can see here, it starts with team-a/. This means we have access to this repository. If we execute this command, we will see that there's only the latest tag inside this repository. So here we see that. But this also shows that we didn't get an error message or like something else not working. We got exactly what we expected. Now to test more our permissions, we can do an AC ACR repository list. In this case, we list all the repositories inside the container registry. In this case, we should see 3, and here we already have them. We have 2 of the team A, and then also 1 of team B. And this is because we gave the Container Registry Repository Catalog Listener role before. This allows us to just see all the repositories are in there. But again, I don't have permission to the team B repository. And to prove this to you, let's do again an AC ACR repository show tags, but this time we use the repository of the team B. So if we execute this now, we'll get an error message that we don't have the permission, or we are not authorized. The error message in this case is a bit misleading because it says authentication required, and it sounds like I just have to log in again and then I can access it. But the right error message should be permission denied because I don't have the permissions. All right, so that's everything I want to show you in the terminal. Now let's switch over to the Azure portal and I'll show you how it looks there. And I think this will help you for the first time when you see it to understand how to set permissions and what we can actually see there. Here in the Azure portal, we can see we have here our container registry and I'm logged in with the admin user right now. If you remember, the admin user has the owner permission because this user has the permission on the entire subscription, but we didn't give any permission on the container registry. If we now scroll down to the repositories, we will see that we get here an error message because we don't have the permission to display any images. So in this case, we could assign the container registry repository catalog lister to the admin user, and then we would see the images or the repository, but this admin user would still not be able to do anything with them. Like we wouldn't be able to push or pull images. Now let's take a look at the rules. So if I want to add a new rule, and we're going to add this container registry repository writer rule, the same rule we gave in the Azure CLI. If we click on next, then we select a user. Here I select the same user as before, just for the sake of the demo. I actually didn't click on the rule. So now I selected the rule and we can also see here the conditions have been made available now. So you can click on the conditions and here you can build the same condition we had before. So to do this, we add a new condition. There I can say I want to do it visually in the Azure portal, or I just want to do it as a code. So we could just copy paste the code we had before. But for now, let's create it visually. I think that's easier for the beginning. So here for the first condition, we want to add an action. Here we can now select what actions we want to allow. We can also see there are more actions than I selected before in the code. In the code, I only had two. I had this pull image and this get metadata. So what you can also see, even though we gave the permission of the repository writer to our demo user, this demo user is not allowed to push any images because we didn't set this permission here. For now, let's leave it the same way as before. So we just select these two images, these two data actions. And if you go further down, we have here this build expression. And here you can add an expression. Then we select an attribute. Here we can only select request as the source. For the attribute, we can only select the repository name. Then here you can select one of the operators. So here you can do equals the string, does not equal, ignore case, don't ignore case. So your typical string operations. What we used before was the string starts with ignore case. So if you scroll down a bit, and I'm very blind, it's here, string starts with ignore case. It would be nice if it would be ordered or sorted a bit, but it's this one. And then we can write what string we want to use. In this case, we had the team-a and the slash. If we now scroll up, we can click here on code. And then we can see exactly the same code we had before for the demo in the Azure CLI. And this is what I would recommend to get started. So the first time you want to give permission, just click through the Azure portal and then you'll get the right permissions. Once you understand how it works, then you should switch over to the Azure CLI or any other tools like Terraform or Bicep. So for now, we don't have to assign a permission because we already did this. But now let's switch over to the demo user and let's see what this user sees. Here we can now see we are logged in with the demo user and we have our container registry open. If we now scroll down to the repositories, then we can see now all the 3 repositories we have seen before and if I click on one of the Team A repositories, I can see all the tags I have, and I can do the pull operation. But if you go back and open now a Team B one, or we try to, then we get here also an error message. In this case, again, it's status 401 unauthorized, the same error message we had in the Azure CLI, which is, in my opinion, wrong. But it doesn't matter. What you can see is that we don't see anything. We don't have the permissions to access this repository. And I think that's a great middle ground between having a shared container registry, but still being able to operate with your repositories. If you want to really strictly separate it, then you wouldn't be able or allow to list all the repositories here, but it makes life just annoying and harder for developers to work with. So I think that's quite a good solution. And since you're usually working within one company or one department, I don't care what the names of other teams' repositories are. So that's totally fine with me. The last thing I want to show you is if you create a new AKS cluster. So if you search here for Kubernetes, then we try to create a new cluster. And if you click, like here we could enter all the basic information. Then on the next side, we have the node pools. Then we have the networking. And here we have the integration. Right now, the demo user doesn't have the permissions, so I can't select anything here for the container registry. But if I had the permissions, I could either create a new container registry or select an existing one. If I do this, then the Kubernetes cluster will get a managed identity, and this managed identity will get the ACR pull permission assigned to the container registry. This means the cluster can pull all the images in the container registry. That's great and easy, but it does not work with attribute-based access control. So if you have a shared container registry and my cluster should only be able to pull my images, then I can't use this feature. In this case, I would have to create the cluster, then create the managed identity, and then assign the role with the attribute-based access control to this managed identity. The same way we created the role assignment for the demo user. So it's a couple more steps involved, but in the end, we can keep our cluster secure, or the container registry, and we can have managed identities and only the permissions needed. This is everything I wanted to show you today. So today we have seen that we can use the ABAC, Azure Attribute-Based Access Control, for our Azure Container Registry, and this will allow us to give permissions on a repository basis. For example, I can say I want to give my users access to all the repositories that start with a specific string. In the demo I've seen, we used the Team A as our string. This means the demo user was allowed to access all repositories of the repositories of Team A, but none of the Team B. Additionally, we assigned the role to be able to list all the repositories in the container registry, and this allows the demo user to see all repositories from Team A and Team B, but was not able to access the repository of Team B. I think that's a good solution to have the attribute-based access control, but not make the life of the developers too hard and just let them see what's in the container registry. I think this attribute-based access control is a great option if you have a shared container registry. For example, if you use a private tier from a centrally managed team, this makes it easier to manage and also cheaper, but still keeps everything secure. We also have seen if you use the Azure Kubernetes service, the AKS cluster, then you can't attach the Azure Container Registry. Otherwise, you just get the ACR pull permission, and this will override the attribute-based. So you have to create the cluster, create the managed identity, and then you can give this managed identity the right permissions. I hope this was interesting for you, and if you liked the video, please like and share it. This helps the channel out. If you have any questions or comments, let me know down below, and I hope to see you next week with another video.